A U.S. Navy-guided missile destroyer sailed through the sensitive Taiwan Strait on day, the U.S. and Taiwan military said, the same day that Chinese fighter jets drilled in waters close to the democratically ruled island. China, which considers Taiwan its own, has been angered by the Trump administration's stepped-up support for the island, such as more arms sales, U.S. patrols near it, and a visit to Washington by Vice President-elect William Lai in February. Taiwan and China are also embroiled in a bitter spat about the former's lack of membership of the World Health Organization during the coronavirus outbreak, because of objections by Beijing, which views it as merely a Chinese province. The U.S. Pacific Fleet named the ship that sailed through the Taiwan Strait as the Arleigh Burke-class USS Berry is forward deployed to the U.S. 7th Fleet Area of Operations in support of security and stability in the Indo-Pacific region, it said in a brief statement on its Facebook page on Saturday. Taiwan's defense ministry said its armed forces monitored the ships as it sailed south through the waterway. It described the U.S. ship as being on an ordinary mission. Also on Friday, Taiwan said Chinese H-6 bombers and J-11 fighters again carried out trails above waters to its southwest. Taiwan's Air Force kept close watch. The ministry added Taiwan has repeatedly complained of China continuing to apply military pressure during the virus crisis. Taiwan is China's most sensitive territorial and diplomatic issue, and Beijing has never ruled out the use of force to bring the island under its control. The narrow Taiwan Strait that separates the island from China is a frequent source of tension. The U.S. Navy has been stepping up patrols through the strait, with its less than a month ago, prompting China to say the United States was playing a dangerous game with its support for Taiwan. The United States, like most countries, has no official relations with Taiwan, but is the island's most important international supporter and main source of arms. In January, another U.S. warship sailed through the strait less than a week after President Tsai Ing-wen won a landslide re-election on a platform of standing up to China. The Chinese Navy recently launched a series of naval drills to shore up its coastal capabilities in the Pacific, a region where China's goals frequently clash with those of the United States. The move comes as U.S. aircraft carriers suffered from outbreaks of the novel coronavirus disease that has already infected hundreds of sailors. The People's Liberation Army deployed Type 22 missile boats to the East Sea for 4 days of live-fire exercises late last month involving warfighting scenarios that an unnamed military expert told the ruling Chinese Communist Party's Global Times newspaper on Thursday were designed to boost the vessel's coast combat skills. Maneuvers also reportedly involve counter-mine, damage control and rescue operations. The Type 22 fleet, dubbed E-class wave-piercing catamaran missile patrol boats by the Pentagon, is designed to use stealth and speed to overcome much larger targets such as aircraft carriers, the premier symbol of U.S. power projection across the globe. In the Pacific, the U.S. has deployed aircraft carriers and advanced naval assets to challenge China's vast territorial claims. But at least 4 of the advanced warships have been linked to cases of COVID-19, the coronavirus disease first observed late last year in China, but that is now reported in the U.S. more than any other country. One such ship, the Guam-anchored USS Theodore Roosevelt, has registered some 416 cases as of Thursday, including one sailor who had to be rushed to the hospital after he was found unconscious aboard the hard-hit vessel. The carrier's former commanding officer, Captain Brett Crozier, also reportedly tested positive for COVID-19 after he was removed from his post last week over a leaked memo appealing to his superiors for support in quarantining personnel. In a speech on board the USS Theodore Roosevelt, former acting Navy Chief Thomas Modly accused Crozier of either betraying the armed forces or being too naive or too stupid to lead the ship. He was forced to apologize and eventually resigned Wednesday after his remarks were leaked to the media. Elsewhere in the Pacific, the U.S. Navy has reported COVID-19 cases among sailors stationed on the USS Ronald Reagan, currently in Yokosuka, Japan, and, on the other side of the world's largest ocean, at least one service member assigned to the Puget Sound, Washington-based USS Carl Vinson has also reportedly tested positive for the disease. The USS Nimitz, readying to deploy from further down the U.S. coast in San Diego, California, was revealed Thursday to have a very small number of breakouts, according to Air Force General John Hyten, Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. "It's not a good idea to think that the Teddy Roosevelt is a one-of-a-kind issue," Hyten told reporters at a press briefing Thursday. "We have too many ships at sea. We have too many deployed capabilities. There's 5,000 sailors on a nuclear-powered aircraft carrier. To think that it will never happen again is not a good way to plan. Our military remains ready and continues to operate around the globe," he added. Navy Lieutenant Commander Megan Isaacs offered Newsweek further details on the situation aboard the USS Nimitz. A sailor displayed symptoms, was placed into isolation off the ship out of an abundance of caution, and subsequently had testing that was inconclusive. Sailors that had been in close contact with the individual were also removed from the ship as a precaution and placed into quarantine. That sailor remains off the ship, Isaacs said regarding the second Nimitz sailor that has been reported as positive for COVID-19. They tested positive while out of the state on leave in early March. That sailor remains in that location and has not been to or aboard Nimitz since departing the area on leave, she added. As for the question of U.S. military posture amid the pandemic, she said, "Our ships and carriers continue to serve and deploy around the world, ready to execute missions across the full spectrum of fleet operations to safeguard U.S. national interests and those of our allies. Even in this crisis, the Navy protects its people and our people protect the nation," she added. The Navy is implementing safety mitigations to maintain the health and well-being of our sailors and their families at units and installations around the globe. The U.S. Armed Forces have increasingly shifted focus in recent years from war zones across the Middle East and Afghanistan to East Asia, where top economic competitor China has expanded its military, economic and political influence. The command known to the U.S. and its allies as the Indo-Pacific has witnessed increased confrontation between the conflicting interests of Washington and Beijing. As the COVID-19 crisis spread throughout the ranks of the U.S. Navy, our Labor-class destroyer USS McCampbell transited the Taiwan Strait, a stretch of sea claimed by both China and self-ruling Taiwan, which Beijing also considers under mainland sovereignty. The journey followed similar trips by Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruisers USS Chancellorsville in February and USS Shiloh in January. Chinese Defense Ministry spokesperson Senior Colonel Ren Guoqiang condemned what he called provocative actions by the Pentagon shortly after the latest U.S. Navy crossing of the disputed waters. "We will absolutely not allow any foreign forces to play the Taiwan card, and will not tolerate any attempts of secession. The PLA has the will, confidence and capability to thwart all secession efforts and safeguard the nation's sovereignty and territorial integrity," he added. Around this same time, Chinese guided missile frigates Zucheng and Yulin conducted live-fire operations, including anti-submarine training in the South China Sea. China has 2 aircraft carriers of its own, compared with 20 operated by the United States. Chinese President Xi Jinping has sought to expand his country's naval forces, which were reportedly set to be bolstered in the coming years by at least 2 more aircraft carriers currently in the works. While Xi mobilized significant military resources to battle the COVID-19 outbreak that first emerged in Wuhan, the country has ceased reporting new instances of the coronavirus disease in the central city once the epicenter of the disease lifted its 76-day lockdown on Wednesday. Now, the U.S. finds itself devoting substantial armed forces assets of its own to battle the growing coronavirus crisis, something the CIA warned in a memo late last month could benefit China and Russia's long-term efforts to elevate their status on the world stage, as Newsweek previously reported. Moscow and Beijing have called on Washington to cooperate in battling the pandemic while U.S. and China spar over the origin of the virus in response to Secretary of State Mike Pompeo's allegations Wednesday that the information didn't flow fast enough in the early days of the epidemic. Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zhao Lijian defended his country's handling of the crisis, telling reporters Thursday, "We hope that the American people can also overcome the epidemic at an early date and resist the narrow-minded approach of certain politicians who politicize the epidemic and stigmatize China to shift the blame."